It's time now for the award-winning #1 local talk show in Northeast Pennsylvania, The Sam Lesante Show. Now here's your host, Sam Lesante.
So my friends, the book is called In God We Trust, The Dollar We Worship. Because it's not what you earn, it's what you keep that matters, and it's all God's. If you recall, about 10 years ago, I had the author of this book on my show, Don Galade, and he's here today to discuss this book. Interesting enough, the book was written 2011. Remember 2011? And you can get this book on Amazon. It's an interesting book. It's a good reading book. I'm probably halfway through the book, but there's so many facets about the book. And you know, when people talk about biblical and you know, the Bible, etc., I don't know why people get nervous. They shouldn't get nervous about that. In fact, that's what, when you die, that's what you're looking for, is salvation, okay? And Don, nice to have you on the show.
Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
Folks, he's my godson.
That's right.
Believe that, he's my godson. Didn't take after me, but he's my godson.
Yeah, hairline too.
Hairline, well, that's the only thing you got, is you're losing your hair. Don, a little bit about yourself.
Well, other than when I was 16 and I sold pianos for you, I've been in the financial services industry since 1987. And it's pretty much all I've ever done. I had a fascination for studying the Bible many, many years ago. And it's neat. It led me on this path where I realized that Jesus talks about money more than he does heaven and hell. And I was kind of taken back by that at first, because everything I did my entire career in financial services was involving money. So I started, that's where the research came. That's where it was started as almost just an interest. And you know, the path from there, God has a sense of humor. He really does. But 1 Corinthians 10:31 tells us that whatever we do, we are to do for the glory of God. And you take that verse in Greek, and everything means everything. So whatever we do, we're supposed to do it for God. And that's kind of what I kind of started changing in our practice after we wrote the book.
What brought you to, you know, closer to, you know, the Bible, and what inspired you? Because, you know, you were young at the time, and I don't know many young people today read the Bible. Yeah. It's an interesting book, that's for sure. Everything you can imagine in that book, okay? If you want problems solved, you read the Bible. And I was fortunate when I went to King's College, because the first semester of freshman year, you studied the Old Testament, and then the second semester you settled, you learned the New Testament. And boy, the things you learned about that. So what brought you? Did something happen in your life?
Well, when my wife and I when she was pregnant with our first child, you know, now he is a minister now at Faith Assembly. But when she was pregnant with him, we always had this feeling that he was going to be in the ministry. Whether he was going to be a Catholic priest, a Protestant minister, we didn't know, but my wife always had this unction. But anyway, we got very involved in the pro-life group, and that's where we met Mary Ann Lahan. That's where the birth of the Voice of John film came. So through the pro-life movement is where we started realizing that the sanctity of life is something that God takes really high up on the list, even above money. And that led me into studying the Word more. And then it was a spiraling into where we're at now.
When you wrote the book, okay, and it's pretty lengthy, because you cover a lot of areas here. What does the Bible say about money? God is the source, not your job. Well, you know, what do you mean when you're saying, you know, people will go out there try and earn what they can. You do it every day, hopefully in the right way. We know we have to participate and help our congregations, no matter what denomination they are. Is money a bad thing?
No. And it's funny because most people, the reason why it took so long for me to be able to get this to where it is now on the Amazon charts is because of the misconception that the love, that money is bad. It's the love of money. And then we could talk on that. One sentence for an hour. Money is a tool. If you're a carpenter, you have a tool belt. Okay? You have a tool, that camera. Every job, the person has a tool. So money is a tool. We need the tool. And it's not about how much you give to the church. People think, oh, you're just going to work for the bishop's annual appeal here. And you're gonna, no, it has nothing to do with that. You have to really dig into the scriptures and realize that when you worship the dollar, and there's people that don't have a dime to their name, but they could still worship the dollar. It's your heart. It's all about your heart. How do you view money? You know, you hear the story with the widow with the two mites, and there's parable after parable where are based on money and based on greed and based on what you're supposed to do with the resources God gave you. Sometimes it's just a matter of taking care of the poor, taking care of your parents, taking care of, other people in your life. It doesn't even necessarily have to be giving the money to the church.
In this book, okay, you explain certain things about different parables, and you explain different things that you interpret. So there's many ways of interpretation of the Bible, okay? It reminds me of George Bernard Shaw when he introduced My Fair Lady premiere. At the end of the thing, they had a reception, and this lady's pushing her way through, and she said, Mr. Shaw, Mr. Shaw. He said, yes. She said, I know exactly what you meant when you wrote this play. And he said, what did I mean? And she proceeded to tell him what he meant when he wrote that play. And he said something I think was fantastic. He says, ma'am, if that's what you got out of my play, that's what I meant.
Yeah.
So the interpretation, Don, okay, maybe my interpretation may be different years. Where's that middle ground?
I'm so glad you asked that. Because the fourth book that I'm working on, because we didn't talk about the others, but the fourth one that I'm working on right now is on that topic. When we look at something, a scripture, the first thing we have to think of is, okay, who wrote it? Who is it written to? All right, and it's funny because the word interpretation, I think so many people have used, well, I interpret that verse this way, so I'm just going to go with that. Well, when you take a verse and you go back to the original language it was written in, most of it is Greek in the New Testament. For example, Jesus talks about love. Well, there's more than one verb for the word love in Greek, and it means different things in different scriptures. So when you have a tool that allows you to convert the words in that verse back to their original language, sometimes they leap off the page and there's no other thing that they could mean other than those definitions. And it's exciting. That's what makes reading the Bible one thing, but studying the Bible something else. And that's what makes it fun when you start to dig in and go, holy cow, pardon the pun, I didn't realize that those words meant such and such. And you might have read that scripture 100 times.
What inspires you?
You know, when your feet hit the floor every morning, and you're healthy, and your children are thriving, and your marriage is thriving, and you've got the lights are on, and the bills are paid, you have no choice but to say, by the grace of God, those things exist.
Don, we went through a very terrible pandemic and bad year, and so many emotions and depressions, etc. And people are troubled, they're confused. Are we in charge of our own lives anymore, or is the government going to run us? We saw a lot of terrible things happen in the last year and a half, and hopefully it'll end, and hopefully we'll take our lives back again. Okay, it really was scary. So with that trouble that people have, some people turn to different things. Some people turn to drugs, some people turn to alcohol, and some people turn to God.
Right.
I'm thinking, from what I've seen in the last year in interviewing the number of people, those people who hesitantly turned to God came out a little better.
you could find a scripture for any question you have, but Jesus is very clear when he says that he wants us to not be lukewarm. Because sometimes you can be all in, and sometimes you could just only pray when you've got a crisis. Yeah. And we all do that. Yeah. All right? I'm preaching to me here, okay? Yeah. We all do that. So he wants us to be all in. So when you're all in, does he care about you getting the bills paid? Yeah. Does he care about healing your baby? Yeah. Are bad things going to happen in this world that are out of our control? Yeah. But he didn't cause those.
See, people think differently, Don. Yeah. Why did God do this? If there is a God, a loving God, why is my son or my daughter or my cousin or my aunt or my friend have cancer, dying, or and they blame God for that. Even good people that go their churches, whether they're Catholic, Protestant, Jewish, or whatever. Okay, and that's always, I'm mad at God. You hear?
Absolutely. Yeah.
I'm mad at God.
I've been there. My sister died very young. I mean, she was older than me, but she died young. And this is what started having me dig into those exact same questions. And here's what I found. We live in a fallen world. All right? God only has one promise that means the most out of the entire Bible, if I could sum it up, is he wants you in heaven with him for eternity. So we get caught up in our earthly existence, and we're not healed on earth, and we don't have any money on earth, and you know what? And not to sound coming out the wrong way, but God cares about us being there more than he cares about us being here. This is boot camp. All right? So yeah, those things are horrible, and I'm not minimizing any suffering somebody goes through, but God didn't cause it.
It's interesting because we as humans, are well advanced in technology and whatever, but then when you hear God knows every hair in your head, he knows everything, and it's hard for us to imagine. And I remember having a conversation with my good friend Father Jack Ryan, who was the president of King's College, a good friend of mine. And I was delivering a talk, and I had lunch with him around Holy Week. And I said, Father, when you look at a stadium and there's 100,000 people at the stadium, and you think, how does God know about every one of these people and every hair in their head? It's so hard to imagine that. He said, well, the only way I could present it to you is this. Look at when you're walking the sidewalk and you see ants on the sidewalk. Yeah. What do they know about nuclear fission or nuclear energy? And it's sort of like we have, it's amazing, isn't it, Don?
Yeah. Well, God even wrote about ants. That's in there too.
Is that? Yeah. Well, I mean, so then you say, well, that's right. What do they know? But so we only are limited as what we know. We don't know the power that's involved.
We can only think linearly. Yeah. And we can't think with, there is no timeline for God. And it's fun. It's so much fun. When you really, really dig in, it becomes so much fun.
Folks, the name of the book is In God We Trust, The Dollar We Worship. And it's a #1 bestseller in America, Australia, Netherlands, Japan, and a lot of other places. When we come back, we're going to talk about, we wrote the book in 2011. What did he say in the book and what happened? It's interesting. Stay with us. Welcome back to the Sam Lesante Show, folks. Remember, 24/7 SSPTV.com. All of our local neighborhood programs are on that on the internet, on our website. Remember, you can contact me at sam@ssptv.com. And just like I'm interviewing Don Galade, who wrote the book, we have a number of authors in our viewing area. Please let me know what you've done. I'd love to have you on the show. Don's book, In God We Trust, The Dollar We Worship. Don Galade I'm talking about. Because it's not what you earn, it's what you keep that matters, and it's all God's, and he talks about this. Now, Don, you wrote the book in 2011. You said some things in the book, okay? What happened from the things you said in the book?
Okay. First, what I realized after writing this was, because it was so big, people would say, oh, I don't have the time to read that. So In 2019, I carved it into 2 separate books.
Okay.
Right? So in the original edition, this is here. In the second edition, it's in the second book called 5 Steps. But what I wrote back in 2012, and this wasn't, I'm Nostradamus or anything. This was just research that I was doing, and I obviously credit who gave me this data in the book. But there was a laundry list of things that were predicted that actually came true. Greece would default on its financial obligations. European mega banks will collapse. That happened in 2013. European governments will suffer a cascade of credit downgrades. That happened shortly after the book came out. Spain and Italy will face massive debt defaults, and global debt markets will suffer a critical meltdown. And part of being a financial advisor is, so to speak, as reading the tea leaves. None of us know what's going to happen, but there's signs. And ironically, that's what God says too. There's going to be things that are going to happen, and if you know how to read the tea leaves, I say that teasingly, that you can predict some seasons that we're going to go through, and all of that data that I researched then transpired.
Today, since the pandemic and the churches were closed, and people turn to television or the internet for mass or services, and we are still doing that and getting a tremendous reaction to it, Don, as far as going to church via TV. But unfortunately, some people are not going back to their churches now that things are loosening up, okay, and rightly so. They want to make sure they're 100% clear, right, that, and the masks are done, etc. And I don't blame them at all. But there are some people, even before this happened, that did not believe in going to the worship. Everything was good. They have SUVs, they have a good home, they have a good life. Who needs God?
They're worshiping the dollar.
That's exactly what they're doing, okay? So how do you, and I remember having a discussion with Bishop Timlin and how these people, who are doing so well, they're making a lot of money, who needs to tell their kids have their kids pray, learn about God, learn about what you should be doing. I mean, they got it made, they're, whatever. Bishop Timlin says, that's all well and good, Sammy, until you hit the bump in the road.
Jesus said he didn't come for those who are already righteous. Okay, the sick person is the one who needs the doctor. Now, I'm not going to wag my finger at any person's situation, because that's between them and their maker.
Yeah.
But I could just tell you, from a heart issue, I've seen miracles in my family. I've seen healings of things doctors in my family said, that person's not going to be healed, and they were. I've seen things, financial breakthroughs for people that mathematically it shouldn't happen. Okay, so God answers prayer, but he cares about one thing. Do you believe he will do it? Crying out when you're, on your knees in the middle of a crisis, we've all done that. But do you really, really, really believe God's going to answer that prayer? Because that's what he cares about. Mm-hmm. And what you said about the church and going to church, and people have, the gospel is hitting places it never was allowed before. Because of the pandemic. And guess what? Jesus says, in the end, we will hear, I'm paraphrasing, of course, in the end, the gospel will be preached. Mm-hmm. And then the end comes. So God didn't cause the pandemic, but he can use the pandemic for his good.
We often talk about change of hearts, harden not your heart. And there are sometimes, we all make mistakes. Absolutely. Throughout the life. We go back and say, why did I do this? Why did I say this about, And some people, my wife told me something yesterday about the tongue. The tongue has no bones, but it's the sharpest thing that can break people's hearts. And that's interesting, So, it's sometimes it's very difficult because you've made the mistakes, and I've done them, and you say, why did I do this, et cetera, et cetera. What do you tell people that are having a tough time like that?
Christ died for all of us, and this is the hard part to get your head around. He died long before we were born for sins that we committed after he died. Okay? So his forgiveness is for anything you've done, said, period, the end, except for blaspheming the Holy Spirit. Anything is forgivable. Okay? So we condemn ourselves. We allow the enemy into our head and say, I know what you did last night, instead of saying, yeah, I screwed up, but Jesus got this. He covered it with the blood. It's done.
It's interesting. Folks, I'm talking to Don Galade, #1 bestseller in America, Australia, Netherlands, Japan, and other areas. In God We Trust, the dollar we worship. We'll be back right after this. Welcome back to the Sam Lesante Show, folks. If you just tuned in, you want to watch this show. We're talking to Don Galade. He wrote the book, In God We Trust, the Dollar We Worship. Now, in here are interesting articles. But Donald, you don't have to go through page 1 to the end. You go different areas.
No,
now, how do I get this book?
Well, first of all, if you go to my website, which is inthedollarweworship.com, that's the main website for the book. That'll lead you right to the Amazon link where you can purchase it.
And you said you could read the book on email or
Well, you could get what's called an ebook. Okay. Some people use the Kindles, or some people just like to down all of that.
And you can pick different chapters out.
That's above my pay grade, you know. You click on it, and you buy it. That's all I know.
Yeah. But because sometimes, as I'm going through this book and I'm looking at the different areas here, you have God's will, our will, free will. Okay, financial bondage, living above your means, to save, to invest, income planning, leaving a legacy. There's different things that you just go to that chapter with. We hear biblical responsible investing. What's that all about?
Well, it's funny. This is where I say God has a sense of humor, because I wrote the book because I was enamored with the topic. Then God showed me, hey, I care about people's money, and here's how I can prove it. Biblical responsible investing means there are investments that you can buy. Stocks, bonds, mutual funds, exchange traded funds, doesn't matter what it is. Oh, by the way, this is not financial advice, full disclosure. Okay, so you could buy investments that don't take the funds you've given them and sow it into things that you don't approve of. For example, many pharmaceutical companies like Merck, Pfizer, Target, Walmart actually take their profits and they sow into abortifacients and the abortion industry. There are people like Nike, Intuit, Home Depot, Facebook, and Apple. They are also anti-life as far as what they choose to do with their profits.
So they support abortion?
Correct. And I can provide these statistics to anybody who wants to email me. I'll give you where I'm getting this data from. So it's not just about bashing any particular company. Then there's a host of the Amazons, AT&Ts, and the Alphabet, as it's called, with Google, that actually support pornography. So a lot of times people say, well, yeah, I got to make a buck. I get it. But there are investments out there that you could put your money in that don't support things that as a Christian would offend you. And I can easily show somebody how that works.
Don't you think, I know we got a minute left, don't you think that people, knowing that, in their beliefs, some people could care less about if you
That's true.
If you could kill as many kids as you can, like our current governor, where he kept Planned Parenthood, and he's using the excuse that it's women's health care.
That's true.
And when you see these aborted babies, as you know, we've done this show many times. Yeah, I mean, so you would pray for change of heart, wouldn't you?
Yeah, that's absolutely it. Because this matters to some people. To a majority of people, it doesn't.
That's right.
And that's okay.
Yeah. And that's those are the things, because we're going on with our life, and what do? We have enough troubles in our life and turmoils, and now you're telling me this is providing an income. But I say pray for a change of hearts, because that's the only way. These board of directors or whatever, the president.
But you could find the same returns.
I understand, yeah.
In things that
don't support that.
That feed babies and dig wells in Africa.
Yeah. Well, yeah. Don, I got to compliment you. You've been doing a great job.
Thank
I'm
you.
looking. You got books out. He has other books, my friend. The fourth book, 5 Steps, Your Guide to Financial Health. Okay, and it takes some of the stuff in here, but I highly recommend you looking at the book. I wish you the best, your
Thank you.
family, etc. And we'll do part 2.
I'm looking forward to it. Thank you so much.
Don Galade, folks. The book is In God We Trust, the Dollar We Worship. Check it out. We'll see you next time.